Have you ever noticed that virtually all narratives that we receive from white sources about Black people are consistently negative and Black racially demoralizing? Have you ever stopped to consider just how cartoonishly unrealistic this scenario actually is? It's actually a psychological warfare tactic used for controlling Black people. Whenever those in power want to control a large targeted population without physically fighting them, they do so by heavily demoralizing them. They do so by constantly inundating the targeted population with fraudulent negative narratives about themselves. People are easily controlled by the narratives that they routinely receive about themselves. When people are constantly inundated with positive narratives about themselves, this raises their self-esteem, unifies, and inspires them. However, when people are constantly inundated with fraudulent negative narratives about themselves, the opposite happens. This heavily demoralizes them, divides their ranks, makes them self-loathing, and shifts their collective aggressions away from their oppressors and redirects it against themselves. And as long as they're kept within this condition, they can then be ruled over forever. Here's a basic example of how this control through the demoralization system works. Imagine that a crew was out at sea aboard their very own well-functioning ship, and that this ship was being followed by a second ship constantly broadcasting derogatory messages to the first ship's crew. Such messages telling them that their ship was lesser, not seaworthy, perhaps slowly sinking, or that their crew was incompetent, or that there was a mutiny being planned. With time, the crew constantly receiving a negative derogatory message about themselves, being unable to refute nor confirm them, will grow weary, paranoid, and will eventually come to accept the negative assessments about themselves. This will eventually cause the targeted crew to become distrustful of each other, self-doubting. They'll even begin to doubt their abilities, and they will become self-hating. The targeted crew may even become so besieged by deep feelings of inadequacy and resentment towards their fellow crew members that some may jump into the sea and attempt to swim toward the taunting ship, now believing that the taunting ship is a superior ship, even if their ship was in fact the superior one. This entire process was accomplished by constantly inundating the ship's crew with negative, demoralizing disinformation about themselves. Its weapon was the negative messages and the way that they negatively affected the targeted crew. It is a process with the objective to erode the morale of a targeted population through continuous demoralization. By destroying their morale, it can even prevent their will to fight. It's very effective. No group can be constantly inundated with fraudulent, negative, demoralizing narratives about themselves and not suffer some adverse effects. Within a real world setting, this same demoralizing tactic is being deployed by white oppressive forces against the Black population as a means of maintaining control over Black people. The white media's unrelenting negative depiction of Black people that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts our reality is much more than just biased media reporting. It is actually an insidious, Black racially demoralizing divide and rule psychological warfare campaign. Demoralized divide and rule is the method of maintaining control over a targeted population through constant and unrelenting demoralization in order to create self-hate and division between them. The white society writes all Black narratives and controls all Black mainstream media images. The white society therefore literally owns Black people's interpretation of our collective state. This unfair scenario allows the white society to easily negatively shape Black people's perception of our collective selves. They've transformed this scenario into their greatest weapon used for controlling Black people. This control system is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly subjects Black people to receiving only the fraudulent worst narratives about ourselves. Within this system, fraudulent, black, racially demoralizing propaganda is being pumped unrelentingly into the unsuspecting minds of the black population without being challenged nor counterbalanced by an equal amount of black positive, racially affirming information. It conveys a subliminal message that black people are now our own worst enemies and that we therefore need whites to govern over our lives. Moreover, that black people should admire, respect, and trust only whites. This system is extremely effective because when black people are repetitively presented these noted narratives from trusted white media sources, it can be very difficult to resist its implied propaganda programming, especially when the propaganda is being told daily and so unrelentingly. The basis of this concept of warfare works by affecting subconscious minds of the black population through demoralizing propaganda. This psychological warfare tactic works by tapping into the immense power that shame has upon the human mind to mentally enslave black people. Its weapon is the demoralizing message that it carries and the way that it negatively affects the black population in terms of our behaviors. With time, being unable to refute the constant negative information being told about us by the white society, many black people eventually comes to accept those narratives. The constant taunting of negative propaganda about us unconsciously influence how many black people perceives ourselves, thus creating division and self-hatred among us. It also shifts our collective aggressions away from the white society and redirects it towards their own people. This is a true reason for the self-hating within our community. It literally creates a psychological prison for the minds of black people. Those black people who do not critically think never notices their mental change. This is not some silly conspiracy theory. It's the truth that they hide from us. This is all possible because people are like computers. All you have to do is keep giving people certain information every so often, and you can persuade an entire generation towards an applied objective. It doesn't matter if the information presented is untrue. Most black people will act upon it because they have all been given the same disinformation about our racial group. This psychological warfare system provides the white society with a more proficient method for controlling and subjugating black people. Because unlike the past blatant racist systems that black people could easily identify and therefore develop counter strategies to unify ourselves against, this system is not easily recognized, nor is it easily comprehended by most of its black victims. This psychological warfare program works so well, in fact, that it not only makes black people more compliant with white dominance over our lives, it in many cases causes black people to prefer white dominance over our lives. It is at the root of the reason why many black people perceive ourselves as being our own worst enemies, our self-loathing, and reveres Caucasians in spite of a brutally horrific history to the contrary. It's always by deliberate design when the oppressed start thinking exactly as the way the oppressors want them to think. To our detriment, the oppressed will always believe the fraudulent worst about them. That's a quote from Frantz Fanon. This is the truth of our plight and condition. It's the truth that they hide from us. The subliminal manipulation of large targeted population through media propaganda is not a conspiracy theory. It is a well-proven tactic that the white ruling elites have thoroughly researched and have thoroughly mastered. The white media has always represented a tyranny of the white society's power over black people. Welcome to the real world. The problem has never been a silly slave syndrome myth. It's time to start functioning based on what is true. One love and peace.